I have chosen this title, A Discussion of the Economic Impact of the Sharing Economy in the Case of Denmark. This may indicate that I have a lot of specific numbers for you, but perhaps I don't have that many numbers, but I have some concepts for you. So this is an overview of my presentation. First, the context, the brief that I have been given, and then, well, maybe we have had some definitions already, but I need to mention a little about them in any case. And then how to measure tourism as part of the sharing economy, and then some statements about Denmark and some data from Denmark, and then a little case study also about Airbnb in my island, Bornholm. It's a Danish island. Okay. So the context, the brief that I have been given is tourism examples or business models in Denmark and statistical data on the importance of the sharing economy in tourism. First, some general definitions of the sharing economy, and then on the next slide we'll go on to try to define the sharing economy specifically in tourism. The sharing economy is a socio-economic ecosystem built around the sharing of human and physical resources. And as you can see in the two next line, it includes a lot of things which make it a little unclear where is actually the limits of the sharing economy. But then the next few lines, it gives some more specific ideas about what it might be about specifically, namely a series of services and startups which enable peer-to-peer exchange through technology. And then a little further down, we have also a useful general definition of sharing economy, which is an economic model in which individuals are able to borrow or rent assets owned by someone else. Okay, so on the next slide we go on to try to make a pragmatic definition of the sharing economy in tourism. Well, this is my suggestion anyway. It can be elaborated. It's the peer-to-peer sharing economy in tourism can be defined or identified as assets disposed over by private persons being rented out to overnight tourists, which are bookable either with or without instant confirmation via known internet-based platforms and apps. And, well, the main examples are accommodation and cars, even though there are many other, perhaps, in my opinion, less important services offered. When I say less important, then I mean in value. Okay, and well, traditionally tourists have been defined as people being away from their normal environment for at least one night, but in recent years the definition of tourism has expanded. So also actually day tourists are included. Well, in some contexts they are included at least. So here I would like to show you an interlinking of some recent concepts. As you can see, I put recent in brackets because some of the concepts are actually not quite recent. Well, let's start with the online travel market, one of the circles. Online booking of air tickets, I would say it started with British Airways in 1998, but then, well, actually British Airways, they didn't get a lot of high percentage of online bookings, but Ryanair, they got a lot of online bookings. Next recent concept is social media. And we have Facebook starting in 2004 and perhaps taking off some years later to a larger scale. And then the third concept, sharing economy in tourism or sharing economy in general. Airbnb was founded in 2008, but perhaps also took off only a few years later. So you can see we have the sharing economy in tourism, and we have the sharing economy in non-tourism. So we have to make a split. What would we like to include in tourism of the sharing economy, and what would you say is not included? But for example, a large part of the non-tourism sharing economy, it's the buying and selling of used products. Okay. So here's a puzzling question, namely, if the sharing economy in tourism by definition is undertaken by internet-based platforms, is it then just a few new major players in the online travel market? Well, traditionally the online travel market, it has been sized simply by adding up the major players and then accounting for a certain percentage not included among the major players. So that's a question also to you to think about, whether we can simply take people like Airbnb and estimate their gross booking values and then include it in online travel, and do the same with some other major players. It can be discussed if Uber should be included in the online travel market or not. Okay. I want to try to position Airbnb in this context of the online travel market. In 2014, hotels and other accommodation accounted for about 20% of the online travel market, of which intermediaries of accommodations accounted for maybe 3/4, which is then 16 billion euros in gross bookings. And in my opinion, gross bookings by Europeans on Airbnb should be seen in relation to this, and in due course be included in this. Maybe it is actually already. Well, then there are some numbers. At least it's a fact that Airbnb, they had 37 million room nights globally, of which maybe 1/3 in Europe, say 12 million room nights. Airbnb can correct me at say 50 euros per room night. So it can be translated to a number in euros, which can be put in relation to the total value for the online intermediaries of accommodation services, and then we can see the share of Airbnb in that context. And Airbnb, it's growing much faster than the rest of the online travel market. Okay. So one way to measure the economic impact of the sharing economy in tourism is to try to include it in the online travel market. Another way to try to figure out the economic impact of the sharing economy in tourism is to try to integrate it into existing regional economic models. Well, for example, in Denmark we have a model which includes all these steps, but in all countries you have a starting point with the registered bed nights. And well, we have heard from an earlier presenter that actually even in some countries already today the shared economy players, they are actually included in the official statistics. Okay, so number one, it's the national statistical authorities who takes care of this and feeds those statistics into Eurostat. And well, in Denmark, then the next step is taken by the National Tourist Board, who adds some bed nights onto the first step. And those add-on, it's small accommodations which are not included in the official statistics, and it's private commercial letting of holiday cottages, which is an important type of accommodation in Denmark. For example, Airbnb, where should we fit them in here? Well, certainly it's small accommodations, and also in Denmark, people like Airbnb and others, they let out holiday cottages. But the question could be how to get hold of these numbers. Well, if people like Airbnb want to cooperate and tell us the numbers, we could feed them directly into the regional economic model. And well, if not, then we could perhaps use the VAT number, because when you look at service fees of people like Airbnb, there's actually a value-added tax on the service fee, and based on this number we can actually calculate back to the gross booking values. Okay. So with the model it's easy, but the problem is to get the numbers, and I don't have the numbers right now. So I would like to mention that there, well, in the sort of definitions of the sharing economy in tourism we have heard so far, the emphasis has been on peer-to-peer sharing economy. But here I would like to mention some examples of business-to-person sharing economy, and that's, as I see it, how the traditional players, they try to respond to the sharing economy, sort of fight back, so to speak. And examples, they include railways offering cars, and bus operators making reference to alternative taxes. We have one of that kind of services in Denmark called GoMore. In other countries it's perhaps more Uber. So both in Germany and in Denmark we have this cooperation between railways and car services. Here are some major shared economy players in Denmark in tourism, for example Airbnb, who increased their number of listings by 66%. I mentioned before actually a Danish player called GoMore, who offer ride share, and also you can rent the private cars instead of sharing the ride. And then Uber also, which however have had some start difficulties in my country. So in my country, which and I'm sure it's the same in other countries, there are different views of certain shared economy players. Well, I've already mentioned one of them a few times, and so you can see that there are different views depending on which organization you ask. For example, the National Hotel and Restaurant Association, they don't like the new competition much. They say that, well, it's unfair competition, and we have to fulfill some rules that the new players don't have to fulfill. But by the end of the day, it's a different set of rules and regulations which apply to the hotel business, and another set of rules apply to renting out private rooms and apartments. So, and we can go on to the next player, the National Tourist Board. They say it's good because it brings in another type of visitors, and as we have seen in an earlier presentations, the tourists who stay in private accommodations, perhaps they stay longer. And then a third view is from the Association of Cottage Letting Agencies. Again, as I mentioned, it's a very important type of accommodation in Denmark. In other countries, it's perhaps apartments rather than detached wooden second homes. This association of cottage letting agencies, they say that, well, we have always done this, arranged this intermediary between the cottage letting owners and those who want to stay in the cottages. We have already done it, so for us we have done sharing economy from the beginning. So well, that's perhaps one example of how difficult it is to define and delimit the sharing economy. What should we include? What should we not include? And I mentioned before in the suggested definition that that in the sharing economy it's new players, but how long are they going to remain new players? Okay. Well, when the cottage letting agencies, they let out cottages, they take perhaps 30% of what of the rent which the tourist pays, but other actors, they may perhaps take a smaller percentage, maybe 10 or 15%, and in this way there could be a new way to get a better deal by using alternative and intermediaries. Okay. Here's an online survey commissioned by one of the major banks in Denmark, and it was taken last month, in fact, and it has been undertaken with more than 1,100 respondents in both. This is in Denmark, but a similar survey has been undertaken in Sweden and Norway, and here are some results. The sharers are relatively young, and there are more people who want to rent shared things than that there are people who want to share their things with other people. And the bank found in this survey that the major factor when people want to share their things is the money. So it's perhaps less the sort of idealistic reasons for sharing. It's more the money. And the unclear rules, it's not really so much of a problem for people in the sharing economy. And Danes prefer buying new stuff to sharing. And as well, these results are also found in Sweden and Norway. The important thing to notice is perhaps this little square box I put up in one of the corners, but you can also see that the slide from 2014, it's much smaller than the one from 2015, so it indicates that this area has been growing, and those who share have increased from those who share their property, it has increased from 1 to 3% in this 1 year, and those who rent other people's things has increased from 2 to 6%. And then there's a group of people who would not share. And this is actually the same results one time more. And I have a couple of minutes more. Yeah. So this is the business model of Airbnb. We could have heard it from Airbnb themselves, but I take the liberty to make my interpretation from my own findings, that the commission, that the service percentage that the owner of the property pays is 10%, and the percentage that those who rent pay is 3%, and actually on top of that comes VAT, which in Denmark is 1/4. So that has to be added on top of the 13%. So you end up by an add-up of 16% on top of the listed price. And and in my opinion, the final price should be shown from the beginning, and that is the case for when you buy air tickets. So when you start a booking process, you should see the final price right away and not having some add-ons on the way. And as far as I know, it's you have some add-ons on the way on one site at least, which should not be the case. And here are some main markets for Airbnb. Well, in overall, these is the top 10 countries for bed nights in Denmark. The national market, it's the largest market, which is also the case on Airbnb, and this number 2 is also the number 2 on Airbnb, and then there are some neighboring countries which don't rank on Airbnb, and then we have well, let's go to the last 2 slides. Here are some peer-to-peer sites in Denmark and on my island, which is Bornholm. Airbnb, almost 20,000 accommodations, and in my island 220. And then there are some traditional players. Kaufman, they have all the online bookable hotel cottages aggregated from the cottage letting agencies, and they have still more accommodations than Airbnb in Denmark. So the last slide here is I have made a study of Airbnb in my island, Bornholm, based on 220 properties, and I have asked the question, what determines the number of reviews or at Airbnb, and I consider the number of reviews at Airbnb to be an indicator of the number of bookings, and I found that the number of years at Airbnb, low price, are the main determinants of the number of reviews and number of bookings. And then it's not the same accommodations which are on booking.com as on Airbnb. To have online bookings and small accommodations and English language, it helps to get more reviews and more bookings, but it's not significant in this study. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks. Thanks a lot, Dr. Marcussen.